Hi there, Johnny here from johnnylipsonstudios.co.uk and welcome to another mixing tips video. And in today's video, following on a little bit from the previous EQ video, which was all about high-pass filtering in particular. It was called my number one EQ move. If you've not gone and seen that yet, go and take a look at that and check it out, and then you can come back and watch this one because this kind of follows on from that. So I tend to, when it comes to EQ, I tend to do more upfront cutting than I do boosting upfront, and there are a lot of good reasons for that. The first thing I want to do is I want to clear out anything that is going to cause my tracks to get in the way of each other, to clutter up the mix, and just a build-up of low-end stuff. And that's kind of a little bit of what I talked about in the last video, where I talked about high-pass filtering to get rid of low-end rumble that often gets captured in your recordings. So this kind of follows on from that, in that I tend to do a whole bunch of other cuts as well to get rid of frequencies where I have instruments or voices where they are sharing largely the same frequency spectrum. So I want to make space for those so that they don't get lost or they don't mask each other. So really important that we do these things, and also to get rid of any nasty frequencies that are just there, that are just sticking out, making for harsh and unpleasant listening. So I want to get rid of those up front, leaving the best, which I can either leave alone if it's really good, or I can enhance it to make it cut through the mix a little bit more if I want to feature something. So we're going to look at, in particular, we're going to focus on these three guitar tracks here: rhythm guitar 1, rhythm guitar 2, and this muted guitar. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that I did in order to separate these three guitars out, because when we come into the pre-chorus and the chorus of this song, all three tracks are playing together. And although, yes, they are different guitar sounds, different guitar tones, and the amp settings using the Ampire plugin are different, still, I felt that they were kind of cluttering each other and masking each other. So I went into mono mode by hitting this button here. And when I did that, everything sums to mono, all the panning goes straight up the middle, and then I can really hear if each of these tracks are cluttering each other up. So that's what I did, and I went to work and I pulled out frequencies from one and I boosted the same area in the other. It's called Complementary EQ, so let's have a look at that. So let's just undo that, and let's solo these three tracks, and we can have a listen to those. Actually, let's hear the mix first, and then we'll solo those tracks.
This is where I long to be. This is what I dream. I'm gonna be a jazz star, blowing some saxophone, grooving hard in some inlet bar, ain't never thinking of home. Gonna be a jazz star. Flying high.
Alright, so that was the pre-chorus and the chorus, and a little bit in the interlude. These three guitars are playing away there, so let's solo these and focus on these just for just a minute. Let's get to this point where they come in. Okay, so it kind of helps there that these two in particular are playing slightly different parts. But there are points where they are both playing together, similar voicings. So let me show you what I did. Let's open these up. Let's open that one and we'll move that over there and we'll pin it. And we will open up guitar 2 and we'll pin it next door. So guitar 1 is over here, guitar 2 is over there. So they both have a high pass filter to clear out the bottom end. This one's slightly lower high pass filter than this one. Kind of doesn't really matter too much, other than I wanted this particular guitar to have a little bit more bottom end sound to it, so I rolled it back. Initially I had them both set at 150, but then I just rolled this one back a little bit to accommodate a little bit more beef. So in this particular case I've done a boost here, a slight little boost at this particular point, about, what's that, 686, 3 dB boost, and a very, very wide Q because I wanted it to be a very broad little boost. And then on guitar 1, I did the opposite. A little bit lower down, but still with this nice broad Q, and I can widen that out a little bit more. About 2.5 dB at 500. I pulled that out, and that kind of meant that these boosts and cuts overlapped each other, which meant that whilst one had the boost, the other one had the cut, and it meant that the mid-range of these two guitars was a little bit more separated. So that's what I wanted to try and do with these guitars. And we call that complementary EQ, and it's a very useful technique, particularly if you've got instruments of the same type. So you can do this with backing vocals, you can do this with horns, if you've got saxophones. Let's say you've got 2 tenor saxophones playing in a similar register, and you can just clear out a lot of the clutter where they might be masking each other. Now what you could do is you could just pan them. You could pan them opposite, which is what I've done here. Well, yeah, that kind of gives you like a faux separation. But when you collapse it to mono, you can find that one guitar just disappears and you just don't hear it. And that's because it's being covered up by the other one. So that's why I pull out one and I boost in the other location. And then in this muted guitar here, again, because it's playing in a similar kind of ballpark, let's have a look at this one. I wanted to make this one stand out even further. So I didn't do any boosting or cutting in that area where I had boosted and cutted the other two. I did a boost up here at 5K. And that made the upper portions of this guitar track stick out a little bit more. So when you hear it in the mix, this kind of cuts through a little bit more than the other two guitars and makes it a bit more distinctive sounding. Again, high pass filter, a little bit higher up this time because I was definitely not concerned about bottom end in this guitar part. Okay, so that's complementary EQ. That is another fantastic EQ move that you can do to get separation from your tracks. Works particularly well with guitars, but could be just as well applied to any other group of instruments that are similar, to be honest. Okay, now these are kind of, I don't tend to do EQ on actual instrument tracks unless they absolutely need it, and that was one way in which I wanted to do that. Now I routed those all through this guitar bus, and this guitar bus just had a tiny little boost again at 5K just to brighten it up a little bit, and some compression. So that's the guitar parts. Other EQ that I did that was a little bit interesting on this was this drum track here, this drum loop, which I will solo. And I think it's playing in this section, let's try it. Okay, sounds a bit kind of like it's down a telephone, which was exactly the effect that I wanted to go for. So if I turn this all off and I turn the loop off as well, let's back it up to the same point. It's just a loop of a little bit of a sloppy funk groove, which I liked. Now if I was to put that with this other drum set part here as well, without this EQ move, this is what you get. Whilst that sounds kind of cool if you're into kind of like the two drummer type thing, there's a bit of flamming, as you might have noticed, between the two snare drums of the two drum sets, the drum loop and then the actual drum set here. I didn't like that too much, so that is why I went for, in particular, this EQ. I rolled off all the bottom, rolled off quite a lot of the highs, and then just left with this boost at about 2K, which is normally a harsh frequency, but since this instrument is the only one doing it, I think I can get away with it. It's a big boost of 13 dB, but I think you can get away with it. Oop, I forgot to take those ones off. So the cumulative effect is that it's nice and buried below everything else in this particular section. And I'll pull it down just a little bit as well. So the idea was that I wanted this to just have a purely percussive effect. I wanted it to sound like a percussionist rather than another drummer playing a similar drum pattern. So that was the idea behind this really spiky EQ. And then on the drums, I did a cut at 500 because there was just kind of this boxy, cardboardy kind of sound, particularly from the snare drum in particular, that was here. And I pulled that out by nearly 3 dB. And then a couple of boosts here. Again, normally I don't boost 2K, but in this particular instance, I felt it was necessary to do that on this track. And then a bit of a shelf to brighten up the cymbals. A high-pass filter. Again, normally I don't high-pass filter drums, but this is like well below the range of the kick drums. So I just wanted to clear out the low end to make room for the kick drum and to make room for the bass guitar. So those are kind of cuts that I do. I have done a few boosts there as well, but as I say, cutting first and then boosting is what I tend to do. So I hope you found this helpful. If you found this helpful, then go ahead and like the video and subscribe to my channel, and you'll find that there's a whole bunch more videos there on my channel already, and videos yet to come. I'm going to embark on some compression videos for this mixing tips series. So if compression is an area that you would like to learn a little bit more about, then I can show you how I use compression and how I use compression in my mixes and in my own songs as well. I also have a new series that I'm going to start in a few weeks' time, where I'm going to look at drum programming and how you can make your drum programming sound realistic and smart, and where necessary for your songs, sophisticated. And although it helps to be a drummer like I am, and it helps to have a little bit of knowledge about drums, you can learn an awful lot from talking to drummers and asking how they would approach a certain thing. So all of that is going to happen on my new series, and I'm going to show you how you can create some really quite intricate drum parts that will sound completely realistic. So until next time, I will see you on the next video.